Hello. Before we do tonight's episode, I wanted to share a couple of quick words with you. We have a special guest, Rabbi Gershom Sizomu, and he comes to us from the Abayudayan community in Uganda. And it was a very interesting conversation to have with him. Along with many different topics, we talked about some of the unique problems that his and other emergent Jewish communities are facing. Things we take for granted here in a wonderful place like Toronto, Canada. I know for me, I get frustrated if my internet cuts out for a couple of minutes at home, my Wi-Fi, or if I have a fuzzy phone call on my cell phone. And yet, tonight, as you'll notice, the episode looks a little bit different, because we were only able to use video chat for parts of it. Because in the community where Rabbi Sizomu lives, they don't have reliable access to Wi-Fi internet. In fact, even when we were using the data plan on his phone on just voice, there were times it was difficult, and we had to pause. So I want you to think about this, because tonight we're going to talk about this and other problems, like the impact COVID has had on small rural communities. And if you are able to, it'd be wonderful if you could help us out. Please feel free to make a donation to my discretionary fund at the Synagogue, and to label that it's for the Abayudayan community in Uganda. And I'll work with Rabbi Sizomu to figure out what the best way to make an impact to help his community might be. Perhaps it's helping with microloans for farmers, or maybe it's helping to purchase better internet for the school and for students to learn more and connect with Jewry around the world. Because at the end of the day, life is difficult right now for us all. But we have to remember that our brothers and sisters aren't just right here in front of us, but they're around the world. So with that, Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy tonight's
Hine ma tovu umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu umanayim shevet achim.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Learning with My Rabbis. We have a very, very, very special guest coming to us today from far away, Rabbi Gershom Sizomu. He comes to us all the way from the Abayudayan community in Uganda. Rabbi, welcome.
Thank you.
And people don't know, but back when I was just a young kid running around synagogue, making problems for the rabbi, you were in California studying to become a rabbi yourself, and you were working at the synagogue I grew up at, Shomrei Torah, with Rabbi Kamras, who's actually been on the program, so my community is familiar with him. But it's really, really great to see you again after all these years.
You too.
I was hoping maybe to start, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the rabbinate, as well as a little bit about your community.
Okay, so my name again is Gershom Sizomu. I am the spiritual leader of Abayudayan congregation, a native Ugandan Jewish community that started in 1919, when the founder discovered Judaism from reading the 5 books of Moses, where he was impressed by the story of Abraham Avinu, who circumcised himself and his children. He did the same and began Judaism in his own compound. With a big following of about 8,000, he started a community that he called Abayudaya, meaning the people of Judah or the Jewish people. He followed all the rules of Torah as laid down in the 5 books of Moses. Of course, without any rabbinic guidance, because there was no rabbinic influence to the beginning of Abayudayan congregation. And that means initially they had observe everything commanded. In some sacrifices, especially, was not whatever they did for Passover was a sacrificial lamb that was slaughtered on the 14th of Nisan. And many others, including laws of Tum and Nida, pertaining to the Mikdash, the temple. So they treated themselves as priests, and they observed all laws of ritual purity and ritual impurity. I am third generation or even fourth generation of the people that started in 1919. And my grandfather was a kid when Judaism started in 1919.
Wow.
He became one of the rabbis of the community. My father also was one of the rabbis. And so I followed the footsteps of both my father and my grandfather, who were rabbis of this community. Although I had the opportunity, as you introduced very well, to study at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies and to be an intern at a magnificent synagogue called Shomrei Torah with a wonderful Rabbi Richard Kamras, who I had another opportunity last year when he came to our celebration of 100 years. We had a mega celebration attended by rabbis and Jews from almost all over the world. And it was an auspicious event, and we celebrated 100 years in style. Our community has about 2,000 people in total, living scattered in 8 villages, and mostly subsistence farmers. Very few people have gone to school, and even those who have gone to school have no jobs because government does not provide enough jobs for everybody. So people have degrees, some people have degrees, but they don't have jobs. Our primary source of income is subsistence and some bit of commercial farming. We grow some coffee. So we do sell some coffee for commercial purposes. We don't use any improved form of technology in agriculture. People use basically the hand hoe, and so we also depend on nature, rain. There is no irrigation. So these are some of the challenges facing farmers, and I can tell you that the biggest challenge for our community is that people don't have domestic incomes. And that becomes a big challenge when it comes to educating people, taking children to school, health care. You know, we don't have insurance here in Uganda. We don't have national insurance. So people have to pay from the pocket in order to access any medical service. And as you know, many challenges that are brought about by lack of a consistent and persistent income.
Wow.
So that is a little bit about our community.
It really is a wake-up call to me. I mean, when we started this, you told me that you're using the data on your phone because there's not Wi-Fi where you are. And it really, I think, puts in perspective the things that we take for granted here in our communities in North America that are really challenges right now for your community and others like it.
Absolutely. Having lived in Los Angeles and having enjoyed the conveniences of as you said, people in North America should not take life there for granted, because a person who comes from here really does not want to come back here the moment they touch the my family had it rough, living the conveniences of life in the US and coming to settle back here in a place where there's no persistent running water or persistent electricity, where healthcare is not as good and maybe not available sometimes, and where there is no Wi-Fi for communication. My wife still misses the dishwasher and the washing machine because there's nothing here like that. Even we still use firewood. We have a smoky kitchen where we use firewood, and I would say that those living in the US or Northern America should actually appreciate and not take it for granted, because many people who come there find it difficult returning to Africa.
I can only imagine, and it really does put in perspective life's challenges, that what we think of as a challenge when Zoom went out for a couple of hours today versus you're talking about electricity and water being out. But yet, despite that, you still returned back to your community to serve as rabbi. Was there ever any thought of maybe wanting to stay in North America, or you knew for sure that this is what you needed to do to go back and to be there for your people?
Yeah, I was sort of at crossroads, because having lived in the US, we had made ourselves and our lives used to the environment in the US and to everything that we actually came by. And to let go of the US was very, very difficult. But, our ultimate goal was to bring Rabbinic Judaism to our people. Our people had no opportunity to have a rabbi in their midst and to teach them a lot of.
You mentioned earlier that your community for a long time really followed kind of the biblical law. So when you came back now with this new knowledge of Rabbinic Judaism with the Talmud and the legal codes, was it difficult transitioning the community in some of their practices and rituals?
Actually, when you follow closely, Rabbinic Judaism makes observance much easier than biblical Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism sort of saved us from the hassle of having to do sacrifices, of having to observe Tuma. We are not priests, but when Vaikra speaks about touching a body and being unclean for 7 days, it doesn't restrict it to Kohanim. It says anyone. It only speaks about the temple, and the community thought that their synagogue is a form of temple that needed that kind of respect, where you cannot go into the temple with any kind of tuma or nida. And Shabbat, the Rabbinic Judaism spells out the 39 forbidden kinds of labor, whereas the Bible does not. It only says melacha, so it becomes ambiguous. What is melacha? For their interpretation of melacha was anything done using hands. So if there's any work you use your hands with, it was forbidden, apart from that pertaining to eating. Otherwise, the rest, if you could not carry, you could not, using hands. It's a little bit close, but Rabbinic Judaism makes it even clear using the Mishnah and also Halachot. The only difficult part was when we taught, and this came before even going to rabbinic school, we came to learn about prohibition of chicken and milk together. Even when it says Lot Vashel Gidi Bechalev Imo. And many people were asking how chicken could produce milk and how the two actually, until we, merit ha'ain, that is, there is merit ha'ain, and laws of association. So they began to learn how the Talmud and Mishnah comes to a conclusion, using all kinds of Kal Vachomer and so on. It is a little bit of learning and a little bit of discussion and a high intelligence, which is a characteristic of Jewish learning. And many people feel proud that they are not only following things blindly, but there is a higher level of interpretation that requires some kind of higher level of understanding. So making Judaism a religion of intelligence and not a blind religion.
Wow. And it's really, in the years since you've been there and went to school, I've just heard great things about the community in terms of growth and learning. I remember when I was in youth group, some of my friends went to spend summers in Uganda with you guys, and they just came back with just the best stories and the best time, they said, and just the hospitality of everybody they met there. And I'm just curious, how has the community kind of grown and adjusted now since, I'm not sure how many years it's been, but that they've been more affiliated now with the conservative and the Masorti movement when rabbis went over to facilitate conversions formally. How has that been now that you guys are a part of a movement as opposed to kind of on your own?
It is very, very much encouraging. The feeling that we are not alone, that we have, being a small group of Jewish people in the country, and, the anti-Semitism and so on. It feels much safer to know and even to realize that there are other people, even just like talking to you on Zoom. It is an encouragement because it shows that we are not alone. We are part of a larger Jewish community. It also makes us proud. Not only that, we have had some benefits, like we had 40 of our youth who went to Israel on a Taglit mission, and that was very, very, very,
Wow.
encouraging for our youth. And when we see rabbis and people come, when we celebrated 100 years recently, the Kenters Assembly raised some money to buy food for the community during the COVID lockdown. And the food was distributed not only to our people, but even our immediate neighbors. So there is also that benefit. Overall, it is a very, 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 very big encouragement for us to be connected with our brothers and sisters in Israel, in the US, and other places of the world.
So I first shared a little bit about your community in a sermon here in Toronto with my community when a couple of young men from there were in the news because they had applied to study in Israel and had initially been denied. And I'm curious what your thoughts on that is, that still in the Orthodox world or even in parts of Israel that you're not recognized as Jewish despite all that you and your community have done to really identify with our people and to take on these halachot.
The Jewish Agency has formally recognized our community as one of the diaspora communities, one of the recognized Jewish communities outside of Israel. So that is the first step that we have secured and very happy about. We know and we are aware that the ultra-Orthodox authorities in government do not want to recognize, and they don't even want to hear about a possibility of a conservative Black community in Africa claiming full rights of return to Israel. And they think that is an abuse to them and so on. We are aware of that, but we continue to pray and hope that one time they will come to the realization that we in Uganda are not different from other conservative Jews in the US or Israel or in Europe that have managed to make Aliyah. We feel bad that 2 of our young people who applied for Aliyah have not been admitted with the Supreme Court of Israel regarding one of them, Joseph Kivita, who was about to be deported. But then there was a court injunction from the Supreme Court that stayed the deportation. He's still in Israel, and we are waiting for the final ruling on the matter. And that ruling will determine our status, our status in the current state of Israel. But we have hope that maybe the ruling will be positive.
I hope so too. I know because when I studied at the conservative yeshiva, I know there was I think 1 or 2 students from your community there as well that were going to learn or wanted to learn. And I think bringing more Jewish leaders and connecting them, educating them is going to be important for both the growth of your community and the growth of our communities. Having different opinions and views helps us all. I'm curious because
absolutely,
one of the big conversations right now in North America has been how kind of the Ashkenazi Jewish perspective, the white Jewish perspective, really has been the dominant theme in many Jewish institutions, particularly in the conservative movement. So I'm curious your experiences as a Black man, as a Black Jewish man in the United States, if you ever felt kind of that you weren't necessarily welcomed in Jewish spaces.
Actually enjoyed a lot of good hospitality in the communities that I lived among, in the Ziegler community, in the Temple area, in Shomrei Torah, where I was hosted for the entire period of my stay, in places where I was invited to speak about my community. There was a very good reception and hospitality. I did not encounter any instances of discrimination while in the US, save from some people who were not actually Jewish, who acted weirdly, and we understood and ignored because we have no experience of that kind of racial discrimination here in Uganda, being all of us being Ugandans. We are not a diverse community like in the US. So we ignored some of those weird actions and looks. Yeah. So, but in Israel, there was some Jewish guy who was cashing checks, and I happened to be in a line with the other white people. When my turn came, he declined my check and said, "Sir, I am not taking your check," before he could even look at the check, while other people were presenting checks. So I knew that was 100% racism, because he probably could not take check from a Black person. He was wearing a kippah. He could not even, he didn't have time to understand who I was, but he simply saw my color and he did not cash my check. So that was a big shame on him. And that's when I actually realized that, okay, the looks on my face can say more than what I think.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear about that, but I'm glad that you never experienced that in any of the synagogues you were in, at least in North America, that the Jewish communities here were very welcoming. I know sadly that's not the experience of some Jews of color. So I'm glad to hear that yours was one of welcoming. And God willing, when some point when travel and COVID and all of that's past us, we could have you maybe here in Toronto. Because I remember as a kid, I think it was maybe once a month, you and your family would lead Kabbalat Shabbat with Ugandan tunes. And it struck me how, as a kid, how amazing it was that we were saying the same words. We said different melodies, different traditions, but that at the root of it, there really was no difference. And we came together to celebrate Shabbat. It was the same words that we were all saying.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I used to love, actually, I remember the melodies were much more lively and exciting than the ones we used generally. So it was always a treat.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how can our communities here in North America, how can we best support your community and other growing communities like it? What kind of resources or things can we do to help encourage the continued growth of Masorti Judaism around the world?
Many ways. Once this lockdown is over, I would like to invite educators, rabbis who have time, even if it is 1 week or two, to come and stay and volunteer to teach our people more. And, that means a lot. We also think that we can encourage online learning, sessions of learning. If our people can tap into Zoom learning by any rabbi or educator, that would require some smartphone, because many people here still use these button, button phones, the ones that are history in the US. I don't think there are people who use button phones. Yeah, there are many people use them to receive and even call. So that means we would need some smartphones, some phone data, so that our educated people who can speak and hear English can tap into sessions. If you are teaching somewhere and people can tap into that teaching, they could learn. We even services like morning minyan and so on, people would actually tap in and join congregations around the world, so that the experience is not only for people who have come to the US or for visitors who have come to visit, but it could be a daily experience.
That would be wonderful to have that kind of connection.
More. And as I said, exactly. So if we can have maybe some laptops. I know phone data can also be turned into Wi-Fi if you use hotspots, meaning we can load one phone with data and it can power other phones in terms of Wi-Fi hotspot. Jewish learning is very, very important, although my people are poor, and we thought that we could also start some kind of microfinance. We have a group here that has learned in university. They have learned business administration, also microfinancing and procurement and so on. And these are the young people we thought could start up some kind of microfinance bank where people can borrow without interest, do some business as they return the principal for others to benefit from. And that could jumpstart our economy and transition it from subsistence farming to some kinds of commercial activity.
Wow. I think it sounds like such an important thing of being able to give people the ability to advance, to move up in society to the next level, and to give time even for learning and other activities.
Exactly.
Wow. I'm curious just how COVID has been for your community, if it's how it's affected it the same way other communities in North America have been affected.
Yeah, most people here, those who go out for any work, we call them daily breadwinners. So many people don't have savings. So when it came to COVID lockdown, those who depended on casual work, which gives them daily income, suffered very, very much, because then for the entire lockdown, they had no other alternative sources of earning. The farmers, which are the majority of the people, did not do very bad. Only that the lockdown came when crops were still growing. There was no harvest. Right now, the harvest began in June and July, so now we have some food as farmers. So, but you know, even those who needed to sell anything, there was a complete lockdown, no public transportation, so you couldn't transport anything from one place to a market because even the markets were not existing. So people suffered very much during that time. Yeah.
Now, I know you are currently serving in the Ugandan Parliament. I believe not just the only, but the first Jewish person now ever to be in the Ugandan Parliament. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm honored to be the history marker of the first Jewish Ugandan and a rabbi to be in a national parliament of our country. And it is really amazing that every member of parliament, now every member of parliament knows that there are Jewish people in Uganda. And they receive me with respect, especially there is a time when Prime Minister Netanyahu came to visit Uganda. And, you know, I got some respect as a result of a Jewish Prime Minister coming to visit Uganda. Although I wasn't invited at State House to be part of the meeting with the president, because I'm also on the opposition. I am opposing government.
You're the opposition
Government
party.
does not feel comfortable. Yes, I'm the opposition party.
It's amazing to hear that, you know, you're treated well by your colleagues and respected. Just I think many are familiar with some of Uganda's past history, and I know anti-Semitism in the government was a major problem under a previous regime.
Yeah, exactly. The reason I decided to participate is because governments in Africa use political power. They misuse it, and usually they misuse it at the expense of minorities. So I wanted people to know that even minorities can rise to those powerful positions, and that powerful positions can only be used to help and not to torture or do anything. We have suffered in the past governments, and you know, I'm now raising some funds from my friends, asking that they support my parliamentary bid, because this is our 5th year and also final year. Next year in January there will be re-elections, and to become a member of parliament is a big thing. You have to campaign. Like my district has 230,000 voters.
Wow.
You know, I have to be able to reach majority of them, and I have to use, because of lockdown, we have to use media, radio and TV, which are very, very expensive. A radio talk show for 1 hour costs $300. And wow, you need to reach out to people through all kinds of means. If I choose to move on my foot or using a car, that is also another cost. So it is costly, but I think we need that respect. And I have encouraged even other young people to participate in the politics of this country, so that even if I don't succeed, we can have others also who are able to succeed, so that we don't leave political engagements for other people alone.
Well, we really do wish you luck in the election, because it's a point of pride, I'm sure, not only for your community, but for those of us here in North America who have known you, that you're a member of parliament, and to know that our community, the worldwide Jewish community, is being represented because, like you said, we're a minority group, not just in Uganda, but everywhere. So it's wonderful to hear those stories of when Jews are able to be a part of the process and to rise to those types of leadership positions. I'm wondering, before we go, could you share with us just one teaching, any Jewish teaching that you found really significant in your life that's been impactful for you?
Yeah, actually, I was impressed by the story of the spies. And when the spies visited the Holy Land, and they reported negatively about it and incited the rest of the Jewish people, the Israelites, against the land and against the leadership of Moses. They actually said that the giants they found were so tall that they appeared like grasshoppers in their eyes. And, in their eyes, how were they able to know that they looked like grasshoppers in the eyes of giants? It teaches that we learned that, that sometimes when you think for other people, when you want to feel for other people, like you look at people and you think that they are thinking negatively about you, instead of concentrating on what you think about other people. It is instead of concentrating on what other people you imagine think about you, it is better you concentrate on what you think about other people. Otherwise, you can fail to exist because you think other people are thinking negatively about you. So I wanted to pull out that because in this political campaign, initially we thought that people don't hate Jews. I am in a place where there are Muslims majority and Christians. In the past, some Christians would call us Christ killers. Some Muslims would actually show some kind of disgust. But then I moved with my kippah. I told the people that I'm Jewish and I want to be a member of parliament. So the thought that people hate us actually disappeared the day the Muslims and the Christians overwhelmingly voted for me, and I'm a member of parliament right now. I cannot think that other people think negatively about me. I can only manage my thoughts, and I cannot actually enter into the eyes and the thoughts of other people. All you can do is speak to people equally, without discrimination, without anything. And you will be surprised what the outcome will be. So I think that is a teaching to all my Jewish friends out there, even to some African Americans who think that being black in America, everybody looks at you as something with disdain. Not true. There may be some racists in the US, but not all white people you see are racists. Not all people who are not Jewish are anti-Semites. We are loved. In the Parliament of Uganda, I have seen there is a group of parliamentarians for Israel. I have seen Christians for Israel. So we don't need to have that kind of stereotype thinking that non-Jews hate us, like the spies thought that the Nephilim looked at them as if they were grasshoppers, when they were not actually in the eyes of the not Nephilim, but the giants. So I wanted to pull out that because it was in my head. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a very, very important lesson. Oftentimes we limit ourselves and what we can accomplish because we imagine what others are thinking rather than instead focusing on ourselves and what we can do.
Exactly.
And I'm very happy to hear that your last campaign went well and that you overcame that. And we hope this one does as well. And it's the same lesson for us as a people, with, like you said, with anti-Semitism. There are people that hate us, but if we walk around assuming everyone hates us, we're not going to be able to find who our friends are. So it's
Exactly.
important to put ourselves out there, to find those connections, build those bridges. Really, Rabbi, it's a pleasure to chat with you again, and I want to thank you so much for taking your time to do this. I really hope that we can find ways for our communities to maybe engage more, because even I, who've learned about you previously and met you, I really helped put in perspective even just this internet connection, just what a different life we lead in our communities. And I would love to see if there are ways we can engage more and maybe help to share some of our resources with your community, because it's so wonderful to hear that it's been growing and thriving, and we wish that it will continue to for generations and generations.
Thank you so much for making me part of your community and for bringing my story to many people of your congregation. And I hope that we can continue this. It is encouraging. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And to everybody watching tonight, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, for this special guest, Rabbi Gershom Sizomu, coming to us all the way from Uganda.
Don't love God if you don't love your neighbor, if you gossip about him, if you never have mercy, if he gets into trouble and you don't try